Open house and panel discussion hosted by Hawaiian Electric.
Okay, aloha and good evening. Welcome and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Sharon Suzuki. I'm the president of Maui County and Hawaii Island Utilities for Hawaiian Electric. You know, we really appreciate you making the time and commitment to join us tonight because we really want your input. Why? Because what we're trying to do tonight is to have a discussion about renewable energy and what the state might look like in the future, and of course, especially Hawaii Island. So we're in the early stages of our long-term planning process where we look at different resources and what we need to do to improve the grid to get to that 100% renewable future. And it's called integrated grid planning, and you'll hear more about it from our panelists. But we really want to hear from you because we know that to be successful, to have a good plan, it needs to make sense for the communities that we serve. So especially here tonight for Hawaii Island. So we've put together, to have that discussion, we've put together a panel with speakers from different perspectives, and you'll hear from them soon. And we really want you to listen, learn, ask questions, and provide us your input. Because together, we think we can achieve that ambitious goal of getting to 100% renewable energy by 2045. So thank you for joining us again. At this time, I'd like to introduce our moderator for tonight's session. It's Sherry Bracken, and she's with KWXX. Welcome, Sherry.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Before we get going, I'd like to ask Wilfred Sibaiton, who is Supervisor in Customer Installation with Hawaiian Electric, to kick it off by giving us a short blessing. Wilfred, thank you for being here.
Good evening. Can we bow our hearts in prayer? E puli kako. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this evening, for this gathering that we can work together on this plan that we call integrated grid planning. Father, we ask that each one present their best, Father God, because these are difficult times, and we ask for your wisdom, for your knowledge, for your understanding, that we can make the wise and right decisions, not only for this generation, but for the future generations as well. So bless each one here tonight, Lord, and we ask that you cover us in your precious name of Jesus. We ask this, and we all say, Amen.
Thank you so much, Wilfred. So, as Sharon said, my name is Sherry Bracken. I'm with KWXX Radio. I do a weekly interview program called Island Conversations, formerly with Lava 105 in Koa Country. And I invite you to listen online anytime at kwxx.com. They're all under podcasts. I also do news for Hawaii Public Radio. And the reason I'm here tonight is really because what we're going to talk about is something that affects all of us. And that is how Hawaiian Electric, which provides most of the electric power in the state, is going to look at reaching their goal, which is certainly their kuleana, but also their mandate to be 100% renewable by 2045. Now, I feel like as a customer of electricity, I'm addicted, I will admit, to having the lights on all the time. But as a customer, I'm really very much interested in having my utility provider be renewable. That's important. But I'm also interested in having them be 100% reliable, because when I turn on the light switch, I do want those lights to be there. It's also important, I think, as customers, you know, we're all looking for either the rates to go down or not to go up a lot, one of the two. And as Hawaiian Electric goes forward and makes a complete change in the way they do business, there are certainly choices and trade-offs that have to be made. Because I know when Hawaiian Electric started, it was Hawaiian Electric sending power out to the people. And it's not that way today. It's not the way it always has been. It's been changing, and it's going to change even more dramatically in the future. So Hawaiian Electric has some big choices to make. The regulatory body, the Public Utilities Commission, has some big choices to make, and we as users have a role in some of the choices that are going to be made. As Sharon said, we have an excellent panel tonight to talk about a lot of different aspects of what Hawaiian Electric is calling integrated grid planning. And we're going to get them in just a minute, but I wanted to remind you that your questions are very instrumental to tonight's activity. So if you did not get comment cards when you walked in the door, raise your hand, and the folks at the back will be happy to bring them. If you'd like to write down your questions, please do so in big enough writing that I can read it. And then also, because we may not get to all the questions tonight, if you put your name, your email, your phone number, some way for the Hawaiian Electric folks to contact you, they will make sure that your question gets answered if it does not get answered here in the forum. So I'm going to briefly introduce each one of our panelists now, and then I'll introduce them a little bit more fully as we give them their chance to talk. First on the left is Colton Ching. He is Hawaiian Electric's Senior Vice President of Planning and Technology. And then we have Kevin Walton, who is the General Manager for Hawaii Island for Hawaiian Electric. Lisa Dangelmeyer with Hawaiian Electric is the Director of System Operations for both Hawaii and Maui Islands. Riley Saito is not with Hawaiian Electric. He is with the County of Hawaii in the Research and Development Department. Ron Terry is he's the Principal of Geometrician Associates. I knew I'd get it if I said it more than once. And he's going to talk a little bit about environmental assessments and such. And then finally, we have a community advocate, Carol Ignacio, who's going to be talking with us in just a little bit. So what I'd like to do is, and I'd like each of the panelists to try to take about 5 minutes and just talk about their area of expertise, and then we can get to your questions. Colton Ching is going to go first. As I said, he's the Senior Vice President of Planning and Technology for Hawaiian Electric. He's actually from Maui and has responsibility for planning Hawaiian Electric's 100% renewable energy grid. Now, no pressure here, Colton, but it sounds like you're doing everything, so I want you to take only 5 minutes and help us understand how. But he hopefully will talk about how they're integrating new technologies into the system. He's actually been with Hawaiian Electric for about 29 years. He's had a lot of different jobs, and I really want to thank you, Colton, because I understand that you have made the sacrifice, or your 12-year-old today's son has made the sacrifice of letting you be here rather than at his birthday party. So thank you.
So good evening, everyone. I'm not sure how Sherry got that bit of information, but for those of you who have had...
He called me and said he hopes you're bringing home a good present.
Yeah, well, but I got to say, though, for those of you who've had experience of having a 12-year-old son, I think he's pretty happy that I'm not there tonight, right? I'm just guessing. So good evening. Thank you for the introduction, Sherry. I want to start off by talking about what integrated grid planning is, and in particular, why we're doing it, right? It's a new process for us, and it really comes down to a new way and a new method to plan out our electric systems for all of the islands we serve, including here on the Big Island, and to do it in a way that needs to be done in order to actually achieve this very ambitious 2045 or sooner goal of 100% renewable energy, right? To do that requires a complete transformation of our electric system, and not just a transformation of just one part, but all parts of the electric system needs to undergo significant changes if we're going to be achieving this goal. So the first part, integrated, is the concept that as we plan for our system, as we figure out how the grid needs to change, we want to look at all parts of the system together and not just focus on one part, or to look at multiple parts of the system separately and in silos. Because we all know we live on an island, and our electric system is an island system as well. And we must rely on the resources available here on the Big Island to be the resources that provides all of the energy and all of the reliability that we all count on. And so we want to make sure we get it right. We want to make sure that we achieve our goals. And so through an integrated approach, we need to look at the generation system and all the resources that we need to add and change over time to get to 100%. But do that at the same time that we look at our transmission system and understand how that needs to change in order to support our 100% renewable energy goal. And equally important is the distribution system and what it needs to change, and how it needs to transform, right? So the distribution system, are the lines that you typically will have like in front of your home, right? This is the distribution system that provides power and distributes it through all of our individual communities. The transmission system is a higher voltage system that moves larger amounts of power over longer distances between points across the island. And of course, the generation system is where generation is produced. And that generation system today, unlike years past when I started in this company, will come from both large generators that we'll see at different parts of the island, but also hundreds and thousands of smaller generation systems, many of which are on your roofs. So we want to make sure we look at everything together to make sure that at the end, as we develop a plan, the plan really is going to be successful in achieving this transformation goal. Another key part of our integrated grid plan that is different from the way we did our past planning activities actually is exemplified by tonight's meeting. We actually haven't started any of the fun engineering stuff around looking at different alternatives and using all of our computer models to do analyses. We've actually not started that yet. But yet, even though we don't have analysis done and we don't have any results yet, we're here meeting with you because we feel it's absolutely important in order for us to achieve the end goal of a grid that ultimately serves all of our customers, all of you, that if we're going to spend the time and try to figure out what it needs to be, we should be sitting down with all of you and asking you, what do you want from your electric grid? Right? What are the attributes that you want? What are the characteristics that for you as a customer of Hawaiian Electric, or of you as a community leader or as a business owner, what are the characteristics of that electric system and all the services that come out of it today and possibly new services in the future? What's important to you? And that's really why we're here tonight, so that we can hear directly from all of you, through the Q&A tonight, but also through the open house session that we just concluded, what's important to you and what matters. And that will be the guiding light that helps us do our analysis in a way that results in a plan to transform our system that actually meets the needs of our customers.
Colton, I'm curious, do you feel that the way you're approaching it now actually is different from the way Hawaiian Electric has approached the planning in the past?
I do think it's different. I've been doing planning at Hawaiian Electric off and on for, I think 20 of those 29 years. And it is different, right? And it's different because the requirements are different. The ultimate goal that we're trying to achieve is different. I think at the beginning, you said that this is, our goal. And, it definitely is the goal of all of us that work for Hawaiian Electric. But it's also the state's goal, right? There's actually a state law on this, right? This is state policy. So our approach, one way our approach is different to kind of give a good example of how things have changed is that we're all in this room together with an understanding that as a state, we have a policy to achieve 100% renewable energy, right? That decision has been made. And I think I don't want to speak for everyone in this room, but I would imagine, if not all of us, the vast majority of us feels that that's the right thing to do, right? And the discussion that needs to happen tonight and the input that we get along the way is what's the best way to get there? Because no one has done it before on electric systems as big as ours. Even though our grid is relatively small to places on the mainland, we're the only ones to have these goals to do it on an entire electric system where we're not connected to someone else. And so being at the forefront of this means that we can't do it alone.
Next up on our panel is Mr. Kevin Walton. He is the director for Hawaii Island for Hawaiian Electric, which means that everything on this island is his kuleana, so no pressure again, Kevin, but it's yours. Now, Kevin was born and raised here in Hilo, St. Joseph's High School boy. He joined Hawaiian Electric in 1996 as a staff engineer, and he's had a lot of different jobs here and on Oahu, so for this island's electric company and for the whole state. He's been Hawaii Island Director since 2018, and he's also very involved with youth soccer and coaches at Kamehameha schools. Thank you for doing that. So Kevin, I know that one of your big issues is resilience, and maybe you can share with us some of the things we should understand about that, please.
Thank you, Sherry, and aloha to all of you, and thank you for coming tonight and spending time with us. Resiliency, by definition, is the capability to recover quickly after any incident or disaster. So by saying that, resiliency is something that is not only just the utilities kuleana, but it's all of our kuleana, because all of us have some stake in making sure that when something happens, we can recover quickly. So when I say that, and I say that because when I explain it, we oftentimes consider resiliency as 3 pillars of resiliency. The 3 pillars are made up of our community preparedness. In other words, the things that we as individuals and families can do at home to prepare for any type of incident or emergency or anything that comes up that would impact us as a community. Having that type of preparedness at home allows us to ride through and come back quickly at our own homes. So that's the first part of it. The second part of that, second pillar, is government preparedness. And I say government preparedness, I'm not saying just county government or state government. I'm talking about the processes and systems that go into place that allows all of us, right, businesses, government, different type of agencies, to actually talk the same language, communicate, and actually work together through that incident so we can recover quickly. So that's utilizing something called National Incident Management Systems. That is a federal program or system that creates this language that we all learn and we all know on this business, government type organizations. It's important because when you have to respond and when you have to come back quickly, these type of languages, the things that you say, the way you approach it is important so we all work together and can come back quickly. The third thing about that underneath the government preparedness is the fact that we use what we call incident management team structures. We put together teams within our organizations that actually use and speak this language, understand how it functions, and then able to act upon whatever the task may be. And then the third one on that is joining other type of agencies or groups across the nation. So like for us at the utility, we are part of Western Regional Mutual Assistance Group, which actually is a group of Western utilities that when we get into emergencies, when there's an incident, we actually share resources from our company with those other companies to respond. And all of you have heard about the wildfires that they had in California. So Hawaiian Electric, being part of the Western Regional Mutual Assistance Group, actually sent linemen and personnel up to go and help respond to some of the tasks they had there. So same like how when we had Iselle, and same like how when Hurricane Lane came, when we had called to the Western Regional Mutual Assistance Group, they had prepared people to come and support us should we had needed. So those things are very important for this response. The last thing, of course, is partnerships. So partnerships is so important on an island. Partnerships with our county, Hawaii County Civil Defense, our county agencies, the DPWs in the county, the partnerships with the state DOT, the Department of Transportation, partners with the Harbors Division, all those pieces that come into play while we partner with them actually help us to respond quickly when emergencies come up. Whether they have emergency needs or we have emergency needs, that partnership helps us respond to that. So that's that government preparedness pillar. The next piece is, or the third pillar is the risk reduction pillar. And the reason why we call it risk reduction pillar is because those are the systems, those are the tasks that we do within the utility to help reduce things that can cause problems. For instance, such as vegetation management. We do vegetation management so that we can reduce the trees, so that way, when we do have storm situations, we have less outages that can happen from the trees. The other thing we do is we do upgrades with equipment. We start to harden, for lack of a better term, harden the equipment so that way they can withstand certain type of conditions. And those things are part of that risk reduction. One example we have for types of planning that we've done, and it doesn't fall under this IGP, but we actually was working with our North Kohala community. Our North Kohala community is actually served by a single line that goes out to the community and provides power to them. And anytime you get a problem with that power, and the other night, Colton actually used the orange extension cord, similar to like this one here, as connecting things together. But since he didn't, I kind of forgot to mention that originally. But imagine having an orange extension cord extending all the way across this Hilo High parking lot and plugging something in there, and it's so exposed. Every time you get some kind of damage on it, the end of the parking lot goes out. That's what our North Kohala community faces with that single line. So we had community meetings, we had business meetings out in that North Kohala area last year. And during that time, when we were having these talk stories, kind of talking about the different options, building another transmission line, as Colton had talked about, or creating a loop system to kind of pick up the community so that way, if one part goes down, we can pick them up that way. And also, the last one was installing some kind of storage system with some kind of microgrid technology that would allow us, should something happen to that single line going out to the community, we could actually bring that community back quickly and then fix the line. Believe it or not, the communities, we had a big support and response from the community of going that route. So even though our project on that is in its infant stages, we have to go through and follow up with submitting something to the Public Utilities Commission for approval. We did have that talk story and interaction, and we did get some feedback. So similar to like IGP, you know, these are some of the things that can happen with these type of groups of meetings that allows us to kind of look at the different technologies and all say our part so that we can do better. With that being said, there's one more part of that North Kohala piece that I forgot to mention, is we also worked with Hawaii Energy. How many of you know Hawaii Energy? Hawaii Energy is an organization that is there for you as our customers or us as the community to support us in helping us develop energy efficiency within our own homes. They have programs that work and help do that. In fact, they're part of the stakeholders within this process. So that's important for future planning, is to be able to, for us, to manage our own home efficiencies so that way we can kind of come up with the plan that'll work the best for us. Thank you.
Are you done? You kind of looked at me like you're expecting something. I will say that I have talked to some of the folks in North Kohala, and I had the pleasure of being at one of the forums that they did where they talked with the community, and something that my eyes were open to was that specifically for North Kohala, and these are just fake numbers, but let's say you needed 100 megawatts of power. But if you're going to do battery storage, you have to know what the people up there need. And the fact is, if they were more energy efficient, you could use a smaller battery. Therefore, Hawaiian Electric would spend less money. Therefore, ultimately, it would be a very positive thing for the ratepayer, because we're all going to pay money for using electric power from Hawaiian Electric. So am I right about that? That there's a true benefit to being energy efficient, not just my own lower energy bill now maybe, but for the future?
So there's two parts to that question, but yes, one part is being more energy efficient is actually a benefit in some cases, but there's also a second part or a caveat, and that's why I said this IGP planning meetings is important, is at certain times during the day, more power is good. Right? Because let's say during the day you have a lot of PV on. Having power usage during that time when there's a lot of PV that we don't control helps. So that's part of the planning process. But if you lower the energy usage in an area and you're gonna use batteries to kind of manage that area, you're right, you lower the energy usage, so you therefore lower the most expensive part, which is the battery part or the storage part. So, correct.
Next, we're going to hear from Lisa Dangelmeyer, who's the Director of Systems Operations for Hawaii and Maui Islands. She's been very involved with procurement and integration of renewable resources, and she really is the renewable resources person for Hawaiian Electric. She's been with Hawaiian Electric for 23 years. She was working on centralized control systems for utilities before that, but no pressure, Lisa, but renewable energy is what we're here to talk about. That's your kuleana. Tell us about it.
Sure. So I'm here to share with you our current, past, and future renewable energy plans. And you know, there's a lot of good news here because we're well on our way to meeting the state renewable portfolio standard goals. We're really blessed on this island with not only plentiful renewable energy, but diverse renewable energy resources. And then by diverse, I mean both in type and in location. And having the generation around the island and based on different resources adds to the resiliency of our system, because we're not, as you might, my dad would say, we're not putting all our eggs in one basket. So I'm kind of going to go through the mix that we have today from like the earliest. We started with, in the very early days, hydroelectric energy was one of the starting points for Hilo Electric. And we still have hydroelectric energy, which is called run-of-river. And it can be a substantial contributor to the system, as much as in a given month, 11% of the energy. And then we were early adopters of wind energy. Since the mid-'80s, we've had wind energy on the island. And we presently have two wind plants, one which is in the north part of the island and the other one at the south part of the island. So those are as geographically diverse as you can have. And that can be very high contributing to the system as well, and is primarily driven off of trade winds. And then we are more recently become, in a very short period of time from a utility standpoint, world leaders in integration of distributed solar, rooftop solar projects. And it's so substantial that it actually has completely changed the profile of our demand on our system, so that in the middle of the day, the demand is lower than in the middle of the night. So that can be on a given, in the middle of the day, high solar period, up to 40% just in that hour. But overall, solar only produces during the day, so that's something we have to consider. And we don't have any control over that from the system operations. And Geothermal energy has been a part of our portfolio for also since before I came to the company. And it's different than the wind and the solar in that it can produce electricity 24 hours a day. It's from a grid operator point of view, it's very dependable, and it can serve load without regard to whether it's raining, whether it's sunny, whether it's windy. So it has what we call a very high capacity factor, meaning that it's able to produce energy potentially up to its full capacity of maybe like 90% of the total capacity or even higher, whereas like solar might be 20 to 30, 30 would be pretty high, and wind maybe, we have very good wind, but like 40 to 60%. So what that means is you get a lot more renewable energy for the equivalent capacity from geothermal than you would from solar. And then moving forward, then we are in the process of the Huhunua biomass project, which is a biomass burning trees. And it's another project that has the characteristics very similar to the geothermal, where it will operate 24/7 and very predictably from a grid operator point of view. And then finally, we have what new projects that were in the plans are going forward with right now, that we have the contracts submitted for paired solar, 60 megawatts from 2 different projects that have 4 hours of battery storage. And the reason for the battery storage is because there's so much rooftop solar that in order for the 60 megawatts to provide value to the system, they kind of have to save the energy till there's more demand, you know, when the other solar is not producing. So with these projects, well, we've already had pretty good renewable portfolio standard percentages, and that's measured as the total energy to the system divided by the sales. And by total energy, we would include the behind-the-meter energy. So in 2017, before the eruption, disconnected the geothermal plant by affecting our Pohoiki substation. We had 57% RPS, so we were well on our way already. And that's before adding, you know, the paired storage, solar plants or the biomass. In 2018, with a partial year of production of geothermal, it was 44%, and then 2019 was 35%. So we're really, as you can see, the geothermal plant was a substantial factor in achieving very high renewable percentages. And one other thing I wanted to mention is the way that we are procuring these new projects is in a manner that we can leverage them not just to provide energy, but also to help with the grid management and to be flexible so that we can actually reliably integrate these projects and still provide electricity that's, you know, there when you turn the lights on, which Sherry really appreciates. In that by having these options for biomass and geothermal, it makes it easier for us to get to 100% renewable energy, which everyone wants, because they're sort of behave like reliable plants that we already know how to make the grid work. So that can help us get there more quickly than some of the bigger challenges that we have in getting to there with a lot of inverter-based like solar and storage. I think that's all I had.
Okay, and I want to remind everybody, as the speakers are talking, if you want to jot down your notes on what you want to ask. I see you writing like crazy. I hope you're writing legibly so I can read it. It's a good time to do it so you don't forget. Riley Saito, as I mentioned, is not with Hawaiian Electric. He's with Hawaii County. He is the Deputy Director of Research and Development, but before that, he was with Mount Alani Resort, and before that, he was with SunPower Corporation, so he has a good background in solar energy or solar power as well. And Riley, I'd like you to give us your thoughts on the county's role and participation in all of this.
Okay, so yeah, I've been with the county since November of last year, and really coming off of 12 years of actually developing solar And prior to that, actually in the hospitality industry. That's what my degree is in. And so it's been very interesting journey with looking at the government process from within and trying to be part of the solution and resolving problems. And so I just wanted to mention something regarding these two. When they're talking about resiliency and managing the grid, we're on the grid integration plan. It's a formal docket right now, but in the real world, last year during the lava event, they had 2.5 days to prepare the grid to lose a substation when the geothermal plant went down. And that's a generation point of 38 megawatt capacity that went. And I don't think any of you can recall any power outages during that lava event and the subsequent Hurricane Lane. And that's because of folks like this, that when they say keep the lights on, they live it, they breathe it. And I really appreciate the work that you've done. And that's more personally, not necessarily from the county side, but from the county side, it really makes, I've been looking kind of at what the county has available and how we're going to reach 100% renewable energy. And there's low-hanging fruit that has been picked, net metering, rooftop solar, all of those things. But in looking at the population of this island, with 60% of the population is asset limited, income constrained, but employed. 38% of this island travels more than 50 miles to get to and from work. The greenhouse gas emissions of this island is, we just completed an inventory, is 54% from transportation. On Oahu, it's 37%. On the mainland, it's 20 to 25%. And so the size of the island and the mere fact of having work centers far from affordable homes causes a reality of having a lot of fossil fuel consumed by transportation. So now how do we actually get to renew 100% of anything unless we address the realities of our people, which are 60% ALICE, A-L-I-C-E. And so from that lens, looking at it, what we've been working on is looking at energy, fossil fuel energy being imported with the overarching challenge of returning how we behave, how we live, to where we need to import zero molecules for energy, which is very difficult. But we had a full population of Hawaiian culture living hundreds of years with zero import. So it's really how we behave and how we feel we're almost entitled to behave, to live, to import a lot of things and export our trash, but call it recycling. And so we really want to take that lens, which is a tough one, but it's what's necessary to resolve 100% renewable. Because unless you work on that tough nut of the actual people, you will never get to 100%. So we're looking at the facilities and the county operations in its fleet, in mass transit. Those consume a lot of greenhouse gases. We're something like, $7 million in gas or something like that. It's crazy. So we need to change that. But how do we get the energy to move the equipment, the people, the products and services? It's through, we look at photovoltaics, we look at batteries, we look at it in a distributed manner across county facilities. Public Works has something like 137 facilities, pools, tennis courts, softball fields. They all have load. They all have load that can be offset through the battery and the PV systems in the parking lot, possibly. But then you can also have those batteries available to support the grid. So in essence, you're creating these centers of generations across in a distributed manner across the island, which would make each local center or substation more resilient. On a daily basis, they're charging cars. During a hazard, they're providing power for the community center. Post, they're having the surrounding community have energy available that's dispatchable to support the grid recovery. And so that's an approach that we're taking. We're looking at similar things for mass transit with the vehicle fleet conversion, having EV, electric buses, but also hydrogen buses running off of fuel cells. And that's because the topography of this island is extremely challenging. You travel to Kona from Hilo, it's 26.5 miles, and you go up 6,820 feet in elevation. And that is very taxing on a battery. And so we need to look at hydrogen fuel cell, because that technology, form of energy, is capable of handling topography. And there is an opportunity to actually manufacture hydrogen on this island through our behavior of dealing with waste. And there's landfill gas capture system that could possibly be used to produce hydrogen. There's excess energy through PV and wind that could be used to produce hydrogen. There's geothermal that could produce hydrogen. There's anaerobic digestion of green waste and wastewater sludge that could produce hydrogen or methane and replace propane. So these are the types of energy programs we're partnering with the utility to move forward towards zero emissions, zero imported molecules for energy.
Riley, you make these plans sound pretty darn firm, and we all know that we have a lot of issues, particularly in the solid waste department. Are these plans that you're talking about actually plans that the county is implementing where they can produce hydrogen, start using hydrogen for buses? I know that a lot of the other counties have committed to have all of their vehicles, buses and cars, run on either electric vehicles or hydrogen, something renewable by 2045. Is Hawaii County committed to that as well?
Actually, the 3 counties committed together on the same day about a year and a half, maybe a little longer than that, to transform the county fleet vehicles and buses to zero emissions by 2035.
35, great.
Yes, correct. And so we got to start somewhere, so we're starting in order to get there. And some of the technology with the vehicles aren't available yet, but unless we assess and plan our needs and have a replacement program, that should stimulate the technology to know that there's a market there that is moving toward that we have plans in place. As far as we do have our toe in the water with the hydrogen bus. We just need one more step of accepting the bus, and we'll have a 29-passenger fuel cell bus operating on the Kona side. There's a fuel production and recharging of the bus available. It's built, it went through its final commissioning and testing with the fire alarm system, and it's about a couple weeks away from producing hydrogen. So it'll produce enough hydrogen for a bus to travel 600 miles a day.
And is that at the Natural Energy Lab or somewhere
Correct.
else?
It's at the Natural Energy Lab at the tip right across from where the office is.
Great. Fabulous. I mean, it's really nice to hear that we actually are moving forward on some of these things, so thank you.
Yeah.
Preparing for mayor candidate forums, for the future.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Riley.
All right.
Ron Terry, as I mentioned, is with his company is called Geometrician Associates, and he's been involved with creating environmental assessments and environmental impact statements for many years. Actually, he has worked on more than 300 since 1990. He's an environmental impact scientist, and some of the things he's worked on include the Monk-Seal Recovery Center, the Pahoa Solid Waste Transfer Station, Hilo Medical Center's Linear Accelerator, the Hilo Bayfront Trail, and Saddle Road. And I mentioned Saddle Road particularly because Walter Kunitake, who is a Kona coffee farmer and very involved with the Saddle Road Task Force, thinks that Ron Terry walks on water. So I am very eager to hear what you have to say about the environmental issues that we are going to need to understand. Thank you, Ron Terry, for being with us.
Wow, what an intro. Thank you. Yeah, I'm among any good qualities that I have, I'm not actually an expert on renewable energy. So I have to proclaim that right up front. In my work preparing EAs and EISs, I encounter quite a few renewable energy projects, but I work on them among many, many other types of things. But I'm especially interested in them because of, I think, my social and environmental beliefs. How many people here know what an EIS or an EA is? Please raise your hand so I see. Okay, pretty well-informed audience, but it's a wonky field, environmental impact statement and environmental assessment. Our state requires projects that have certain characteristics to undergo this process. You involve the public, you inform the public, you develop studies, you put out documents, and in the end, the purpose is not to give a project a clean bill of health, as some people think, but instead it's a disclosure document so that people who need to make the decisions and the public who advises those decision makers has information, hopefully as unbiased and complete as possible. Now, it's kind of interesting in our state, as part of our energy policy, that was promulgated some years ago, we deliberately excluded most renewable energy projects from the state law that requires environmental assessments or environmental impact statements. The only ones that are required are those that utilize state or county lands, state or county funds, or are in the conservation district. In limited circumstances, there are other types of projects that can come in and get it. Federal funding, for example, would qualify for National Environmental Policy Act documents, but we don't require it. Fossil fuel plants, on the other hand, definitely require an EIS. Now, it's interesting because today there are not going to be very many new fossil fuel plants built in the state of Hawaii. There'll be very few EISs for new fossil fuel power plants, but there'll be very few for renewable energy power plants either, unless they meet those conditions. I believe our energy policy is good. I understand the reason for it, but I also have sensed some frustration in the community about not having this method of access to look at the environmental impacts of renewable energy. You know, I don't know if I want to say we should change the law or shouldn't, because I believe our energy policy is important, but I just wanted to bring this up. It's true. And so I guess...
Ron, maybe you could explain, do you know why the state excluded renewable energy projects?
It was for our energy policy of having more renewable energy. They wanted to remove barriers that incentivized renewable energy. I get that. But I think you can understand from my lead-in that I'm going to rain on a parade a little bit here and say that, because I'm not with Hawaiian Electric, so I have a little different agenda, and they were very kind to invite me here. But and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to make it sunny again, okay? But I want to say that renewable energy projects are not without impacts, okay? They are not without impacts. You know, wind energy, as great as it is, it's gone from 50 terawatts worldwide. in 2,000 to 1,600 terawatts now of wind energy around the world. That's fantastic. Wind energy is semi-reliable. You're able to do it all over the place. There are different technologies that reduce the environmental impact, but it is visually interesting to have on your landscape, sometimes unappealing. When you're very near it, it makes noise, and some people complain about low frequency noise, and it really chews up bats and birds. And that's not a good thing. Although I would say building windows and cats kill orders of magnitude more birds than wind power, it does have an effect. And in our state, it's troubling because cats don't kill many Hawaiian hoary bats, but turbines do. On the Auvahi wind farm in South Maui, for example, they had a habitat conservation plan with an incidental take permit, sorry for the jargon, that allowed them to take 21 bats over the course of the facility's lifetime. Well, within a few years, they'd already taken 46 bats. So they had to go back to the drawing board and say, well, what's happening here? They found that bats are actually somewhat attracted to the wind turbines for various reasons. So they got a new incidental take permit for 119 bats. Now, is 119 bats going to be okay? I can tell you, as someone who studies a little bit of biology, that the answer is we don't know. We don't know because bats produce very slowly 1 or 2 litters a year, or 1 litter a year, 1 or 2 pups a year. Some years they don't make it. We've got to do a lot more science before we know for sure. My particular favorite form of energy we're not really doing in this state, that's wave energy, and I like that because there's these side spin-offs. You can have a reef for fish habitat, you can do shoreline coastal protection, and the very best thing about it, you can make waves that you can surf. But they can also attract fish and kill them, and they can provide litter when you have super big storms that's all over the bottom. Solar energy is great. I don't want to say anything about it. I got a bunch of panels on my roof. I'm very thankful for that. But it is intensely material using, and it particularly involves, in most cases, toxic materials, lead and cadmium. They're not good for us. Solar panels are very difficult to recycle. To break them down actually at this point costs as much money as they get back, sometimes a lot more. A lot of the recycling that we do of solar panels actually ends up taking less efficient solar panels, moving them off to the third world where they're sold and used in places that don't really care about efficiency as much. And then eventually they're thrown away and they're not disposed of properly. Hydroelectricity, I love it again, have some friends who've done it, it's a good thing, but it can be a problem. It can ruin fish habitat. Our run-of-the-river systems in Hilo are better because they don't have dams that ruin fish habitat, and they don't take away much of the river's flow. Another type of hydroelectricity is pumped energy storage, where you use wind and solar to get water up and then take it back down again and produce energy. That's good. I'm in favor of it. We need to do it. But when you flood large areas that you need to do in certain types of terrain, you cover up vegetation and you produce methane and carbon dioxide. Some of these pumped hydro reservoirs are actually producing more greenhouse gas emissions than the equivalent in fossil fuel plants would have. So I'm saying some, not all, but it's something that we have to watch out for.
Ron, did you say you're going to actually end up making us smile instead of cry?
I'm POW, I guess, huh? So,
just asking.
I was going to get into biomass and geothermal, but let's forget that. But I think what we really have here is an existential choice between all these things that I mentioned, all these environmental impacts that I mentioned, and a world that is going to see not 3 feet of sea level rise, not 5. We're going to see 50 feet of sea level rise. We're heading in that direction to Pliocene climate levels. And some of these concerns are very broad-reaching, some are just valid. But we've got to make very, very difficult choices. I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that it's all rosy and sunny, renewable good, fossil fuel all bad. Everything we do has an impact, and we have to seriously consider it. Thanks.
It's because it is true. Everything we decide, whether it's Hawaiian Electric or the community input, there's always an impact. Community input is very important, and Carol Ignacio is here with us to talk a little bit about community input. How many of you are familiar with Hawaii Island Food Basket? How many of you know that the Hawaii Island Food Basket was literally started out of the trunk of one woman's car? This woman right here. That is literally how Hawaii Island Food Basket started. And so Carol Ignacio has been involved with supporting the community for a really long time, not just through the food basket, but through homeless outreach, through the caravan program, and homeless shelters. Thank you, Carol, for being with us.
Thank you. I'm here, and I want to qualify myself as well. I am not an engineer. I am not an expert on renewable energy or electricity. I know how to turn my lights on. That I can do. But what I hope to contribute here tonight is my 45 years of working in the community, starting up new projects that at many times are very controversial, and the School of Hard Knocks that hopefully will get less over the years. You know, Sherry mentioned the food basket, Hawaii Island's food bank, in my car in 1989. But that was one of the easier projects, and yet that had a lot of hakaka with that. But before that, in 1987, my kuleana was to get services for the homeless started on this island. At that time, we're beginning to see visible signs of folks on the street, under bridges, many just really struggling for survival. And there were zero shelters for the homeless on Hawaii Island, and that was in 1987. And it was critical to get shelters and housing open. So the first project on Hawaii Island was on Kapulani Street, right down the street here, which is still there. And one would think, like I did, I was kind of really naive, I think, that everyone would be so excited that we're going to open up a homeless shelter on Kapulani Street. Wrong. It was one of the toughest things that I've worked on in my 45 years. I had personal threats on my family and me. Hours and hours and hours and days of county council hearings, and even threatened litigation. What was this about? Oh, my balloon got broken really, really quickly. For some, it was fear, fear of the unknown, fear of judgments about those kinds of people. And that was understandable. This was new. But what I could not understand were the hidden agendas that surfaced. Like, my property values are going to crash. Those kinds of people don't belong in downtown Hilo. Send them to Paneva. Biases towards folks that didn't fit their profile. Like then, it was really just a handful of people, but a handful that really made things difficult to do the right thing. So today, as you are aware, homelessness continues to be a social need, an issue. Thank goodness there are more people supporting our work. We now have Uluvini and Kona. We have the hospital up here. And we're seeing people get better lives. What I did learn from that work was that most people will sacrifice their stuff for the greater good. And that's what gave me and continues to give me the courage to work. Folks may be opposing the integrated grid process. I'm hoping that it's a handful. And I'm hoping personally that it's not out of fear of the unknown, because there's a lot that's known about renewable energy, and simply not due to our own personal agendas. You know, the journey to be 100% renewable by 2045 is not easy. And it's not something we can hope for. It's the law. Whether we like it or not, it's the law. And there will be bumps in the road, but we need to, and I know as a community, we will work through it, like we've worked through homelessness and everything else that's new in our community. You may be familiar with the Napua Makani Wind Energy Project on Oahu, which has created antagonism, distrust between communities, and renewable initiatives. Protests abound. So what can we learn from that and do something different? For me, you know, there's a distinct difference between a protester and an activist. The integrated grid planning process requires activists. So I'm hoping all of you will leave tonight and saying, I'm an activist, not a protester, because there is a difference. So let's look at what that difference is. The definition of activism is one who is active in the role of being a citizen, an active citizen. I'm proud to say I've been an activist for 45 years, and it's not a bad word. I've been committed to creating a level field for the poor and vulnerable in our communities. But I've also been blessed by mentors and superstars that pushed and taught me how to be an active citizen, an activist. One who had a profound impact on my life and work is Punani Burgess, and I don't know how many of you know Pua. Must be the activist among us. Anyway, Pua is a Zen Buddhist priest, a poet, a mediator, and a community builder. In the 1980s, she was part of a group that helped bring about community-based economic development in Waianae, and later in other communities. This started during the controversial development of West Beach. Most of you would know it as the Ko'olina Resort, which Pua and her allies started out opposing because of what it meant for the land or other natural resources and the way of life. Some of the same concerns many, many years later as the Napua Makani project. The mediation process between residents and developers became a turning point in Pua's approach to community building. And I think this is the key message that I want to leave with everyone tonight. Pua continued to involve herself in community struggles as an activist and advocate. But she discovered something. The people on the other side of the table were not monsters. So Pua embraced a role as mediator, creating a safe space for people to come together. She asked us, because I was part of that, to dig the lo'i deep. You know, those of you, the lo'i is, you know, where the taro patch is, to understand each other. In fact, she wrote this beautiful poem, and it's on the website. He alo e he alo. Make sure we talk face to face. I believe we're all motivated by something, and it depends on how we achieve the end results. There are the good, the bad, and the ugly when dealing with an issue or people. So I'm hoping and I'm praying that the Hawaii Island community will be good, active citizens in this process. So everything, I think, must work together and Hawaiian Electric is certainly working hard at that. But everybody must work together as well to make renewable energy a reality. I believe we all need to work towards less constructive criticism and more constructive contribution. That is what created sustainability and abundance in the Ahupua'a system. And that is what will resolve our sustainability and restore sustainability and abundance here. You know, there's a quote, if you change the community, you have to change the conversation. So, you know, tonight begins the changing of that conversation. Our conversation regarding renewable energy, maybe for some of you, must change. The conversation about homelessness needed to change. I believe, you know, as a lifelong fifth generation Portuguese woman from this island, Hawaii is shaped by certain principles and that I find helpful if I remember them. And I try to remember them every day. Everyone is useful. Everyone has something to give. Everyone can contribute, but only with an open mind. You know, when my mind is blocked, I operate with judgment. They should just do this. You know, why don't they do that? And we return to an open mind by suspending judgment and trying to carve out a new path with curiosity, learning and understanding. The second thing is open heart. I know when my heart is blocked, I operate with distrust. Me, us, you, silos. I return to an open heart only by suspending distrust and carving out a new path. Open will. When our will is blocked, we operate out of fear. We cannot create a sustainable future or an abundant future if we're blocked by fear. What will renewable energy be? What will it bring to our community? We return to an open will by stopping fear and carving out that new path, but with courage. So, I want to end by, and maybe for some of you it's not something new, but the Hawaiian people have a word for stopping fear and carving a new path. So, one of the words, well, the word to stop or suspend is ku. Could you say ku?
Ku.
Come on. Ku.
Ku.
Okay. The other Hawaiian word is for carve is ka.
Ka.
Ka. Okay. You put the two words together, what do you get? Kuka, kuka. Kuka, kuka. We locals call it talking story, okay? From an outside perspective, it looks like useful waste of time. But from a native perspective, it is scientifically grounded, a grounded methodology to achieve a system of transformation. And that's what the integrated grid process is about. So let's dig the loe deep. Let's learn more about renewable energy and its impacts and its benefits. Let's talk face to face. Let's kuka, and ensure that renewable energy becomes our norm because we took care of all the pilikia along the way. You know, my husband did some stuff for Helco. And it says, in the beginning, there was light. He was a deacon. And he said, then there was Helco. So.
Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause to everybody on the panel. So I already have some questions, but if you have questions, the nice team in the back will collect the questions and they will get them to me. We will get as many as we can. And as I said, if you put your name, email, phone number, they will get back to you personally, if not tonight. And the first question is, how does Puna Geothermal fit in with the Public Utilities Commission's concerns about the need for non-wire alternatives? And I'm guessing it's Colton. Explain first, what is a non-wire alternative? Because if you don't have wires, how do you get that? How do you make my light switch go on?
Yeah, non-wire alternatives. This mic is not hot anymore. Is this okay? So non-wire alternatives, it's a kind of unusual name. It represents a concept that there may be more than one way to provide what had been a very traditional way to distribute energy and serve. Thank you. Is that a message with this? Yeah.
Message in a bottle.
Okay. And typically what we'll see is when you say have a community or neighborhood, there's electrical lines in your neighborhood to get power from that substation down at the end of the street over to each of the homes in your neighborhood. And then let's say over time more homes are built, or more of your family members move back into your home, and so your use of electricity increases. That increases the requirements of those lines and other devices in your neighborhood. And a traditional solution would be to add maybe another line, or to take the line that's there and upgrade it, right? Those are considered wired solutions. So non-wired solutions is to look at things that don't require the use of some of these traditional components like a wire or a transformer, and look at things like reducing the amount of electricity that's being used in the homes in the neighborhood, right, through efficiency, or to use distributed generation, rooftop solar system, and some storage systems that may be in your garage to reduce the amount of electricity that collectively in the neighborhood is imposing upon the wires in the area, so that you avoid having to put in a new set of wires or upgrades. And that's really what a non-wire alternative is. The question is about Puna Geothermal Venture, the geothermal plant, and how does having a geothermal plant align with or comply with the move towards non-wire alternatives. And embedded within this question is the point that the Hawaiian Electric companies have been asked by our regulators, the PUC, to consider non-wire alternatives as we are looking at the need to modify or upgrade our distribution or transmission system to meet a set of requirements, right? And to always think about these non-traditional solutions, including the use of distributed energy and storage solutions, to be perhaps a better, lower cost or more reliable alternative to a traditional one. And so the question about Puna Geothermal Ventures, and maybe I don't fully understand the basis of the question, but the question is asking why, is by putting or restoring a generator like Puna Geothermal Venture, which does require a set of transmission lines in order for the power to be used throughout the island, does that comply with, or is it in alignment with the Commission's ask on non-wire alternatives? And I would say yes, right? Because if not for having generation like Puna Geothermal and having them in locations that are around or near where power is actually consumed, and in places where they can then be used at other parts of the island in a way that supports the reliable provision of, in this case, renewable energy, that really is a means to minimize the amount of wires that may need to be added in absence of having a resource like that. Puna Geothermal Ventures is a large plant, right? It's a 38 megawatt plant. I think it provides, when it is back in full service, about 25% of the energy. And if we didn't have that energy, the energy would need to come from somewhere else. And that still allows us to look at things like non-wire alternatives and the use of distributed resources, either ones that are there today that exist in your neighborhoods or new ones that could be added in the future to avoid upgrades of a distribution system.
So I know that Puno Geothermal was responsible for us getting really good, renewable energy percentages. Is there an ideal percentage of power that should come from geothermal?
There's no ideal number, and I think we need to think about. Just take a step back, right? It's 2020, 2045. Let's say we shoot for 100% renewable energy in 2045, which is what the law requires. That's 25 years ahead of us, right? My son, hopefully we will be out of college by then.
I hope he's not living with you by then.
Well, you don't know Jacob. But I kid about it, but it's really to make the point that no one in this room and none of us here from Hawaiian Electric can predict what's going to happen over the next 25 years. All technologies will change, some much more rapidly than others, efficiencies, costs, the impact that, to Ron's point, right, the impact of different technology alternatives and what impact it will have now and in the future will change as well. State policies will change, and so I'll never say that I know the answer to some optimal number for anything, including the amount of geothermal that's right for this island. But what I will say, so that this answer isn't a total cop-out, Sherry, is that, like anything in life, whether it's your plans for your financial future, the way you want to get almost anything done, right? You almost never get the best answer by relying on just one thing and one way to get there, right? It may be a very good way to do it on paper, but then life happens, right? And life has a way to kind of throw you curveballs along the way. And so you always want to be prepared for those unexpected circumstances and things that you just can't predict. And science, economists, the finance industry, we all move towards having a portfolio of solutions, a contribution from a range of different options that may not be on paper the optimal, total, perfect solution, but from a risk perspective and an uncertainty perspective, gives you cover, right? It prevents you from making a really, 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 really bad decision. And I think one lesson we can learn is that when our systems were 100% fossil fuel, right? That is one solution, right? And there's a lot of risk when we depended solely upon one source of energy. And I think a lesson that we need to keep going forward is that we should never put ourselves in that situation again where we're reliant on just one solution.
You answered the question about Puna geothermal relative to non-wire alternatives. The same question was submitted about Huhonua, so I imagine the answer is pretty much the same. But there's many other questions about Huhonua. Okay. Is it reasonable to call it renewable when you're burning trees? Burning trees releases carbon back into the atmosphere. Is it just dumping that smoke back in there? What's protecting the atmosphere? Talk about that.
Sure.
One of you, please.
And folks, jump in with your mics if you want to add to this. So I'll start off by saying that the state law, which is really the policy behind the reduction in the use of fossil fuels and the increase in the use of renewables, biomass plants like Huhonua or Hunuaola do count understate policy as a renewable resource. Having said that, which I think is a part of the question itself is, well, is a biomass plant like Huhunua the same thing in terms of an environmental impact or greenhouse gas emission impact with another renewable technology, say wind or solar? And clearly the answer is it's not, right? To kind of build off what Ron talked about, different renewable technologies have different characteristics. They have different electrical characteristics that Lisa and Kevin spoke about, but they also have different environmental impacts. They have different community impacts, different visual impacts. And that's really part of the challenge in this undertaking, this effort that we're undertaking, that we need to have and make informed choices amongst alternatives that have different attributes from each other, and not a single one is perfect. So how do we come together first as a utility, but more importantly together as an island and as a state to determine what's that combination that works best for everyone? There's no perfect one. There are always going to need to be trade-offs that we need to make, but the trade-offs that we make are going to be driven and dependent upon the input and perspectives that we have from all of the customers and communities that we serve.
You know, you didn't answer my question. What's going into the air? Do you know the answer?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or I can tell you about my phone call with Warren Lee, who's the guy yesterday.
So a biomass plant is a combustion plant. It's a thermal plant. So to produce electricity, it burns something, right? There's a combustion process, and in all combustion processes, it emits emissions, right? There are constituents that come out and heat that comes out of the combustion process. For plants like Huhunua, the biomass fuel, and in the combustion process, amongst other things, does release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases as part of that process. I think the thinking of how a biomass is treated as a renewable resource under the state law is that the biomass fuel prior to combustion, in the growth of that tree or shrub or grass, in its growth and development actually absorbs carbon emissions. And that on a total basis, when you look at and process, that it is carbon reducing or carbon neutral.
Well, I understand that actually for every 100 trees they would cut, they're going to actually replant about 105 trees to make it carbon neutral. But Carol, you're real close to that plant, and I think you have some thoughts about it.
Well, not
I've heard you give
near
me your
the
thoughts.
plant, but near the trees. I don't know how many of you know when the Hamakua Sugar closed in 1995, Bishop Estate Kamehameha Schools bought 30,000 acres and planted eucalyptus trees. And those trees were, initially, they were being cut down and sent to Korea or China, something. And it ended about 3 years ago. So the trees are all here. And these are the trees that are to be used for the biomass project. Now, you know, as I said earlier, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a scientist, but one thing I know for sure, it sure is more heartwarming that those trees are being used for renewable energy here instead of it being sent to China or Korea. So that's what I know about the trees.
Okay, that was good about the trees. I'd also like to mention that Kevin Owens is the plant manager for Huhunua, back there, bald-headed, and he will be happy to talk with any of you about that plant after the forum. Won't you, Kevin? Just thought I'd throw that in. But I do understand that the Environmental Protection Agency does put controls on both Hawaiian Electric and on anything else that is emitting anything into the air, and I trust that it's being done in the proper way. Kevin, you're dying to weigh in here. I can see that.
So yes, anytime you put together a plant like Kotanet said, a thermal plant, and there is air emissions, there's a air emissions permit that we require to follow, and that air emissions permit has restrictions on what can be admitted, what you have to do prior to anything coming out of the stack, and that would be what governs keeping it within the environmental side of it. And then maybe Terry could answer a little bit more, but that's the environmental
I think you've answered it. Now, there's a really important question here about resilience, which is how is Hawaiian Electric really preparing, and this is a county question as well, how are we preparing for climate change since, as Ron mentioned, it's happening?
So it's a great question, and resilience has become, I think, a subject that has become more in front of all of us in various communities. We need to look no further than Hurricane Maria and the devastation that it caused in Puerto Rico as a reminder of the power of Mother Nature and the increasing intensity and frequency in which things can happen, right? This is in addition to the sea level rise that Ron spoke about, and the importance for all critical infrastructure, including electricity, to be there reasonably soon after these events to help with public safety, with life support, and the rebuilding of an economy and communities. So we were very focused on ensuring that the electric system that we build and transform into the future isn't just clean, isn't just reliable on blue sky days, but is also resilient. So when these events that we know will happen, we don't know exactly when they will be, but when they happen, and longer term events like the sea level rise that Ron spoke about, that our electric system can recover to support the broader community and islands recovery from that event. Here, whether it's fortunately or unfortunately, for those of you who live on the Big Island, I think you know this point perhaps better than anyone else in the state as you went through things like Tropical Storm Iselle and the lava event. So we're building resiliency into our plans. It's actually a part of what we're looking to do in integrated grid planning. A very key part that we think is important to do it right is to have good information, right? There's a lot of debate on sea level rise. We know it's going to happen, but to understand exactly what's going to happen, how much more flooding are we going to experience, where it's going to be, because it won't be the same everywhere, how much winds are we going to see, how more frequent are they going to be. We're using a company, a startup company that's actually developing some really novel climate change models so that we have a better set of information and data to begin understanding what we need to do on our grid to make it more resilient.
I wanted to mention, you may think this is going to conclude at 7:30. It is not. We're going to go till at least 10 minutes to 8, and I just want to let you know that, and I hope you stick with it because the questions are excellent and many. Talk a little bit about electric vehicles. First of all, my understanding is that 2/3 of the fossil fuel consumed in the state really is from vehicles of some kind, and there are many questions about electric vehicles ranging from, can you make more charging stations? Can you make those charging stations you have available 24/7? Should I get an electric vehicle? How much does it cost me to charge it at home, et cetera? So a little commentary from somebody on electric vehicles would be super helpful.
Sure, and then I'd really like for Riley to weigh in, because I know that this is a very personally key topic that he has a lot of passion about. So I'll start off from the utilities perspective. Electrification of the transportation sector, we believe, is a really important one, period. And the intersection between reducing fossil fuel use and carbon emissions from the transportation sector and reducing carbon emissions and reducing fossil fuel use for the electricity sector have tremendous synergies together. In fact, about 1.5 years ago, we did a study that looked at if there were to be different scenarios of adoption of electric vehicles. And when I say electric vehicles, it can be battery electric vehicles, or it could be fuel cell vehicles where the fuel comes from an electric source. That by increasing the amount of adoption of electric vehicles and conversion of use from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles, number one, it's obviously going to increase the amount of electricity that needs to be produced to now serve electric customers and the transportation sector. But that's actually a good thing, because as we increase the amount of renewable on the electricity sector, that almost has a compounding or twofer effect, right? It helps both electricity and transportation. And having the additional electricity consumption for the purposes of reducing carbon emissions in the transportation sector can actually provide a very valuable resource to help us on the electricity side more cost-effectively integrate renewable energy onto our system, because it's a load where that's far more controllable in when and how it gets charged versus lights, for example. And in our study, we concluded that whether you own an electric vehicle or not, if there's greater adoption of electric vehicle use, all electric customers benefit from that. Of course, you benefit more if you yourself have an electric vehicle. Not everyone may have that choice, at least in the near term. But even with that, you do benefit as we do more electrification of the transportation sector.
Can you increase fast enough to accommodate what seems to be growth of electric vehicles?
Yeah, that's a concern that everyone has. But I think we're in a very good position to do so, because over the years, through additional energy efficiency that we've all adopted, to the adoption of renewable energy resources, the electric loads that we see on our grids, including the load here on the Big Island, today is significantly lower than what it was 10 years ago, and especially during the daytime. So we do have capacity to serve new loads like the charging of electric vehicles. We can be most efficient and smartest about it if we can find ways to charge it at times when it's most beneficial in the use of electricity, of renewable energy, and to let the grid be most efficient.
How about charging stations? Some of them are private, some of them are Hawaiian Electric. Specific question has to do with Pahala Gym and Punalu'u Bake Shop. Both of them are locked up at night, but I think only one of them is yours. I think the Punalu'u Bake Shop is yours?
Yeah, Punalu'u Bake Shop, that's the one we maintain and we
Okay.
just put in.
How about Pahala Gym?
No,
Not
that's
yours?
not us.
So when you have one that's not owned by you, is it just up to the property manager or the gym to maintain it, to make it available?
So the electric charging systems that we put in, we are the ones that come back and we maintain and we upkeep. The ones that we don't put in is actually the individual owners. So you have the Home Depots, the Targets, the various different areas that have it.
So the Punalu'u Bake Shop one that's gated, is there any way to get it on the ungated part of the property?
We can look into it. I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
would have to check on that.
Okay, just checking. Obviously, that must be who submitted the question. He wants to go sit down at Punalu'u Bake Shop, not during the day, but at night. So is there a requirement that buildings put in a certain amount of charging stations? And, I've heard that the ones that are privately maintained are either not necessarily available or not that well maintained. I don't have an EV, so I don't know that to be true, but what are your comments on that?
Currently, there's no state law the SB 1000 last year died in conference committee. And so pretty much Honolulu County is moving forward with their own mandate. And really it's key that you listen and look at the language, because it says EV ready for new permitting system. That doesn't mean you get a station. That means you get conduit that you can run through and possibly put in a station. Okay? So regarding EVs in general, in working in the energy sector, transportation, and with the county, I went to walk the talk and I converted to an EV in November. And so I bought it used because it made sense. It's a 2015 BMW i3, and I'll tell you the price. It was $18,400. The new car costs like 50 grand, and I could not afford that. And it gets 4.7 miles per kilowatt hour. It costs 35 cents per kilowatt hour. So pretty much the cost for fuel is about little over 7 cents a mile. Okay? So what has happened is I am probably increased my electricity bill by about $110 a month, but it offset filling in fossil fuel gas of $250 a month. So the operation has been economically beneficial. The used EV market makes it attainable for middle income person like me, and but the fuel cost for the fossil fuel vehicle was like 20 cents a mile. So definitely there's an economic benefit. The charging station challenges is a nightmare. Okay, you go on your app, you look, there's things that work and don't work, and most of them don't work. And to be honest with you, we are working on resolving some of that charging infrastructure, what I brought up earlier, where we're looking at transforming portions of the county fleet to zero emissions, either EV or fuel cell. That using the siting, because siting is a major problem on charging stations. But that's something that the county has control over, is facilities all across this island. Ball fields, parks, tennis courts, gymnasiums, community centers, pools, and there's load there. There's also a need, there's parking there. So if we did like a parking shade that has DC, battery charging, panels are in DC, charges the battery in DC, charges the car in DC. So the energy use is much more efficient. But then in the evening, then we would actually be able to load offset the evening load for that facility through a power purchase agreement. So now, and we're looking at third-party investment in this. So the third-party investor has revenue from the public charging, the county fleet charging, and a power purchase agreement with the county. So there's 3 sources of revenue, reducing the risk and hopefully reducing the price to actually benefit the taxpayers of the county, provide charging facilities for the public, and provide a dispatchable, reactable source of generation in the case of an emergency for the utility.
I think you answered the question that somebody asked, is how much does it cost? So I really appreciate that, $110 a month.
I've got
That's good
all
to
this
know.
analysis going on, and I drive it to and from Hilo.
And do you have photovoltaic on your rooftop, or this is
Not
just...
yet.
So it's just electricity from Hawaiian Electric.
But
Okay.
I will.
Good to know. Why does Hawaiian Electric not take advantage of natural gas, using natural gas? I don't know that we have it here, but that's the question. This person has an account with NextEra in Florida, apparently, where they use natural gas. So what's up with natural gas and us?
Yeah, so I'm actually surprised, wasn't prepared for this question. So in the state of Hawaii, obviously there's no indigenous source of natural gas. And as much as we don't have an orange extension cord to California to import electricity, we don't have a pipeline there as well to bring in natural gas. So the natural gas, and I will use air quotes because it's not exactly natural gas, but the natural gas that's used in the state comes from two sources. It comes actually from oil, and it goes through a chemical reactive process to produce something called synthetic natural gas that happens on Oahu, where at the refineries on the west side. And then that's distributed throughout the pipeline system on the island. Some of that natural gas comes through the importation of natural gas that is made really cold, converted into a liquid form, and then shipped to the state by Hawaii Gas, and then added to that synthetic natural gas. And they just started a project to produce a very small but promising amount of natural gas from a wastewater facility to convert the waste product into a methane-like product that then is reformed into a natural gas. But the volumes of that are low, and natural gas, is a fossil fuel. It's become a very, very popular choice for utilities on the mainland, where the gas supply is abundant, because that natural gas on the mainland is really cheap. And they're really in an oversupply situation right now. And although it's a fossil fuel, and it produces electricity through a combustion process, it's one of the cleanest forms of fossil fuel in terms of the amount of carbon and other emissions that come out of that combustion process. But we just don't have the volume and really that option here in Hawaii.
There's a question about helping our kupuna population as they age, who wish to first remain in their own homes, then go to some kind of a facility, assisted living or life care. Can't there be a sliding fee scale based on their income monthly? It's apparently the program as it exists now is an annual program, not monthly. I don't know about those rates, but that's what the question is. It's really a rate question about giving discounted fees to seniors as they move from home to facility. Do you guys have the answer to that?
Yeah, I think the question is about the LIHEAP program that I'm actually not familiar with. But so I'd be happy to bring the right folks from the Hawaiian Electric team that are not at this table to help that person with that question at the end.
Okay.
But what I will say is the question raises a very important point, right? That in our job of providing electric service to all of our customers, as Riley talked about at the beginning of his talk, we have a range of customers, and not every customer is going to have the choices to do things like electric vehicles and rooftop solar. As great as they may be, not everyone's going to have the ability to make that choice. And as we develop our integrated grid plan, one of the things we need to take into account is how do we serve the diverse set of customers that we have, including the customers that fall into the category of that question.
One of the things that Lisa mentioned is that most of the power is generated during the day, and there is a rate program, time of day usage program, that if you agree to use most of your power during 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., you do get a discounted rate during the day. You guys don't seem to advertise it at all, but it exists, and it does save money, so it's a good thing. Unless you advertise it, and I just have never noticed that. That's just a comment.
Yes.
Yes, yes. You mean I'm right?
And we're actually in a docket, legal proceeding with our regulators and several other organizations involved to look at other future different forms of rate design, including more of that.
Well, you know, I was going to ask, why don't you just make the rates cheaper between 9 and 5 overall? But then again, there may be some people who use more of their electricity in the middle of the night who might not find that quite as delightful. You know, for those of us who don't stay up all night, that would be working. There's a company called Green Mountain Power in Vermont, which apparently uses very innovative strategies. Some of them include giving customers who are going off-grid an energy efficient audit, all kinds of different things. You have the questions in front of you. They draw on customers' home batteries during peak times. They let customers with rooftop solar sell power directly to businesses. They give free chargers to customers who buy electric vehicles. This company must be a very amazing company that they do all this. So talk about whether any of these things are things that Hawaiian Electric has considered.
Sure. So a bit of background before I answer the question. Green Mountain Power is actually an electric utility. They're one of several distribution utilities that serves the state of Vermont. And you know, implied in the questions that they are a pretty innovative and progressive utility. I must say that I had an opportunity to meet not all, but the majority of GMP's executive team when their then CEO, Mary Powell, and some of her key executive staff came to Hawaii to meet with a team of us at Hawaiian Electric to actually learn from us some of the things that we were doing with distributed energy resources, as well as grid-scale renewable systems. And I think they learned quite a bit from us, and through that exchange, we learned quite a bit of them, from them. But one of the things we did learn is that the context in which Green Mountain Power is doing these really neat, innovative solutions is in a context very different from us in Hawaii. In Vermont, renewable energy options, especially distributed ones, tend to be more expensive than the option to take traditional regular service from the utility. And so Green Mountain Power has focused their renewable and distributed alternatives around creating incentives to get more of the customers to choose renewable energy. Whereas here in Hawaii, it's the equation's inverted, right? There's a lot of cost savings to be had by using more renewable energy. And then in Vermont, who's been to Vermont, right? I've been there. I've spent some time there. It's not the best place for solar power, especially in the winter. But the push and I think the value for distributed resources, including distributed solar there, is really for the very reason why solar may not be a great solar resource. Is they got some really tough winter and environmental conditions, and there are many times in the year where Green Mountain Power customers can lose power for days and sometimes weeks because of ice storms and what have you. So the focus of GMP's customers for distributed resources is really to provide that resilience, that availability of power, in this case from their solar and storage system, during an ice storm, so they can get at least some of the power back up following it. And GMP's been pretty innovative in finding ways to incentivize those kinds of solutions for their customers there. They do some good stuff.
You know, my eyes were open. You just spoke about in Vermont, you don't always have solar power. And my eyes were very much opened to the limitations of solar power during July 2018 when I went over to do an interview with Sharon Suzuki's predecessor, Jay Ignacio, and with Kevin Walchin. At that time, we did it in the control room in Hilo, Hawaiian Electric's control room, and they have a map of the Big Island, and they have little dots to show how much solar energy is being generated by each area of the island, so they can figure out how much solar energy is coming in. Well, this was one of those days where on the Kona side of the island, we did not see the sun. You know, it just got a little brighter and a little brighter and a little dimmer, but there was no sun. And I was absolutely surprised at how little solar energy was being generated from all the rooftop solar. I mean, because I thought, well, even with all the VOG cover, you know, solar energy is still coming through. That was not true, so it happens even here. Perhaps you could address the issues and cost associated with modifying the grid to accommodate extensive distributed production from rooftop solar, as we might get more of it, and what role will storage play in these kind of modifications?
It's a great question. So right now today, here in the Big Island, 16% of our customers here have some form of distributed energy, a rooftop solar system or a solar system combined with storage. And that puts the Big Island and the Hawaiian Electric company #1 in the country, in the entire US, in terms of the level of distributed resources. Primarily these systems are on single-family homes. And if you look at single-family homes, about 1 in 3 homes today already have some form of distributed energy, right? 20 times the national average. So that really puts us in the forefront from, putting Lisa Dangelmeyer's hat on as a system operator. That means today, on a sunny day, in the middle of the day at noon, about half of our 650 plus distribution feeders, these circuits that run in all of our neighborhoods, about half of them on a sunny day will begin to start, or in some cases have significant amounts of power flowing in the direction opposite of which those circuits were originally designed to do. And it'll happen every single day in the middle of the day, and then it flows back the other way in the evening. And our circuits, as you can imagine, were never designed at the beginning to do that. And so over the course of the years, we've had to learn pretty much on our own, because again, we were so far ahead of pretty much every other utility, on our own, figure out what we needed to do in order to make this happen. And we were able to find fairly easy, lower cost ways to do it by making modifications to our feeders. But we stand here today at, when you look at all 5 islands that we serve, we're at about just under 30% RPS. And in order to get to 100%, we need to triple our current accomplishments, which means we're going to need to add, in addition to the many options we have for these larger grid scale renewables, we're going to need to increase the amount of distributed systems as well. And we're going to need to continue to look for ways to modify, and we call it transform, our distribution system to accommodate it. We were in this very cafeteria, I think in 2017, talking about our grid modernization strategy. Which is our look at finding ways to incorporate new solutions and new technologies to help us get there. And I think we have a good plan to get us further along. We need to continue that look of how to get there, but it's going to require a significant change and investment in our distribution system to make it really function in a way, in a role very different from what it was originally designed to do. And no one has the total answer of how we're going to get there. But I have a lot of confidence in the smart minds of the men and women that work in our company to help us get solutions.
So here's a small question. How are you ensuring environmental and social justice as you address the goals?
It's a very good question. And I think central to, some of the discussions that we're having in many communities, including tonight. One of the challenges that we have as the utility is that our solutions in terms of the renewable energy choices we make, either the large or small renewable generators that we need to add into our grid to get to 100%, many of those projects, in fact, the vast majority of those additions are going to be additions done by organizations and people other than Hawaiian Electric, right? We've been directed by our regulators to allow all qualifying developers and producers to be part of the solution so that we can ultimately get the best value for our customers. And so the question of, well, how do we get environmental and social justice, where a lot of the factors that play into the question of what is environmental and social justice will be at the hands of someone other than the utility. The question to us in the utility of how do we ensure it is a tough one, right? And I think a good first step that we've taken in our latest round of procurements that's currently underway is we're now requiring, because we can't tell or dictate to a developer that you must use this certain technology and you must site your project in this location. What we've begun to do is to say, if you're going to do a project, in order for us to contract with you, you're going to need to demonstrate, number one, the proven ability to develop projects and work with communities. Number two, you're going to need to submit to us, along with your proposal for your project, your plan to engage with communities to develop it. And number three, we're going to ask you you need to provide your plans to actually carry it out going to the future, and at minimum, meet a certain set of community discussions and engagements so that you're factoring that into how you develop your projects. That's not the total solution by any stretch, but I think it's a good effort to get us more along the way to ensure that not just the utility, but everyone that is involved in developing these range of solutions understands that they need to do things in the right way.
Well, it sounds like a lot what Carol was saying at the start, that you have to really talk with the community, and I would imagine that's how you avoid the kind of conflict that she was speaking of. You know, we have wind turbines here, and they just don't happen to be near big populated areas, right? But it sounds like we could get into that situation if we did not speak, meaning if Hawaiian Electric did not speak with the community in advance. So it sounds like that is your plan.
Yeah, and just one more thing, Sherry, I think your comment there just triggered another thought. I'll be the first to say that getting there where there's the right discussion and solutions, where from an economic and social perspective, the best decisions are made when citing these resources, I'll be the first to say that Hawaiian Electric cannot do it alone. It gets to some of, I think, what Ron talked about, right? Into some of the policies that are currently in place and rules that are currently in place. I think there's a really important role for those policies and rules to also be a way to get there as well. And many others that are not at the top of my mind at the moment, right? It involves all of us, right? The utility, government, community leaders, and every single one of us on facing either direction in this room to be a part of that solution.
Ron wants to comment.
Yeah, speaking of the siting issue that you brought up, Sherry, I thought it would be important to share that there's a bill in the legislature right now, which I know has been deferred, but I think it's still alive, basically, to call for a renewable energy siting study to be done out of the Office of Planning. So that's a state office that would impose some constraints upon the location of renewable energy projects. This came out of the Napua Makani case up on the North Shore of Oahu, where a majority of local residents appeared to not want those wind turbines near them. Their local state senator introduced this bill. It's gaining a lot of traction. I believe it has the support of not the Office of Planning, which doesn't want to have to do it, but the State Energy Office is interested and thinks it's a good idea. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there'd be another layer of regulation and study involved in where renewable energy goes.
Thank you very much. We have not gotten to all the questions. I apologize for that. We got 2 of your 4, but the other ones, talk to them separately. And so for those who did not get their questions answered, they will be answered if you put your name on it. The person who asked about kupuna pricing, you didn't put your name, but talk to one of these guys before you leave. And I promise they will get back to you, and if they don't, call me and I'll get right on them. I really want to thank the folks on our panel for being here tonight. Let's give a warm round of applause to all of them. Thank you to Hawaiian Electric for sponsoring this. If you get this brochure, there's a website and there's an email where you can actually send in more questions, make more comments. Don't forget that we have Huhonua here. I won't say what Warren Lee told me you were, but bald-headed for sure. And then Mike Kalekini is here from Puna Geothermal if you want to ask him any questions. Don't give me that look, Mike. I'm Sherry Bracken. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We very much appreciate it. Aloha.
Open house and panel discussion hosted by Hawaiian Electric.